everyone. Welcome to this talk from Game Dev London. We are Game Dev London. We're also other things, but we are some of the core people from Game Dev London. We're going to give a talk today on networking and making friends in games. It's something that we know quite a lot about because we arrange events and networking events. We do game jams and other things. And we also have a podcast, plug, if you want to go listen to that. And you can find us at gamedev.london. So I'm going to allow my guests here to introduce themselves. Nichola, if you'd like to start.
Hello, my name is Nichola. I'm a junior game designer at Sharp Mob London, also a host in the Game Dev London podcast. My most recent episode talking about tattoos and body art in games, which was pretty cool. Just got some yesterday, and my arm still hurts.
Nice.
But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Hello, my name's Jade Leamcharaskul. In the games industry, I'm a freelance music composer, and I've been in the industry for about nearly 10 odd years now. I'm actually one of the original founders and organizers of Game Dev London, where it used to be called Game Dev Lunch, and is now evolved into a really, really big community all over Discord and meetup.com and everything. And within the Game Dev London ecosystem and family, I guess, I actually organize all the community events and socials. So that's what I do. Over to you.
Hello. My name's Gianluca. I'm the marketing manager for Game Dev London. I'm also marketing manager at another studio called Beta Jester. And I recently left my marketing career of about 5 years to try and break into games. And so now I'm also a game design student alongside those things. And I got involved in Game Dev London about nine odd months ago. And so I guess I have a specific perspective on networking about trying to get into games and get the opportunities to come up on stages like this and get your name out there.
Nice. So we're going to start with how do you approach networking? And Jade, how do you approach networking?
So for more context in my answer, I'm coming from a background of being in the industry for many, many years. When I first joined the original Game Dev Lunch, this was back in 2014-ish. So I've seen almost the networking landscape change quite drastically. Even if it was like about that back then, 5 years ago, there's a lot of focus on drinking culture because we are here in UK and Brits, they like to drink in the pubs. So obviously my approach would be, at first it would be like, okay, maybe I should start drinking myself just so that I don't feel left out, I don't feel awkward, and just being like the one girl that doesn't drink like back then. But now my approach to it is just be like, okay, I know this is the kind of venue, maybe it's a pub, maybe it's an office type party or a studio, but my approach would be like, you know what, if you would like a drink, the option is there. If it isn't, you don't have to. So yeah, and then obviously the actual networking part is be open, smile, make eye contact, introduce yourselves, and try to be more invested in the other person in the conversation, because one thing that's really off-putting is when you don't introduce yourself, but then you just start talking about yourself and not letting the other person talk. I'm like, I don't really want to work with you or continue this conversation. So that's my approach.
What about you, Nichola?
So yeah, alcohol is also a good option to talk to people.
Only if you want to.
Only if you want to, yes. Then drink small amounts at a time.
Stay safe.
Yes. So I would say when it comes to networking, going to events like EGX and whether it's the Res one or today's massive one, or joining communities online, so Game Dev London, Discord, shout out. But also just like finding other communities online. So I'm part of the She Plays Games Discord as well, and just popping in, saying hi, and being like, hey, I worked on this, or what is everyone up to today? Just going in, saying hi, introducing yourself is just a nice way to say hello and just be like, I'm a cool gamer too.
What about you, Gianni?
For me, I guess I'd separate it into two kind of sections, two kind of categories. like obtaining opportunities to network and then the actual networking itself. So for opportunities, I guess I'm just going to call out what Nichola said, basically, going to events, putting yourself out there, attending whatever you can, getting involved in the community.
Yeah.
That's the best way to start. And then in terms of actual networking itself, I take quite a positive, interactive approach. Like, I want to have a good social interaction with somebody that doesn't make them feel like I'm there to get something out of them, which can often feel hard to do if you're not familiar with networking. But I focus more on showing interest in what somebody has to say. And I think that's really the fundamentals of having good social interactions with anyone, is people feel the most comfortable when they're talking about themselves. And so if you invite them to do that, show interest in what they have to say and ask further questions to get more out of them, then they're more likely to leave that conversation saying, damn, that guy was all right. That wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
And do the same for you, in which case you get to talk about yourself and present your value, and then the networking begins.
Yes.
For me, I definitely prefer meetup events or networking, professional kind of events where drinking isn't the focus or even just isn't there. I don't do my best anything when I've been drinking. Like, I don't do my best art, I don't do my best thinking, so why would it be the best way for me to socialize? I get it that, like, when I was younger, it was definitely a thing. Like, you kind of use it as a bit of a social crutch, like it helps you relax a bit. But these days I find that the complete opposite is true, and I'm just going to end up probably making an idiot of myself. So, and as you guys were mentioning there, obviously trying to get a good interaction with someone and making sure that you're listening to them and being kind to them. I think there's also like a bit of a flip side to that. Like, don't be too interested in someone, and like, or certainly don't. So I've had this recently, like, where someone was just a bit too flattering. They were just like, oh, I really think that what you're doing is amazing, and I really think that you're an amazing human being. And I was like, that's cool, thanks. I'm probably gonna go pretend to buy a drink now. But so with that in mind, what do you feel is like, or how do you think you can best define the line between like making friendships and making professional connections, and how do you kind of juggle that? Let's start with you, Gianni.
It is an interesting question. I think that there's a difference between friendship and friendliness. And I think you can be very friendly without openly trying to be somebody's friend. And I think the difference for me in doing that is how personal you are, like what personal aspects of your life you share and to what depth. So I tend to try and be friendly with everyone I meet and get along with everyone I meet, but I don't tell them about the depths of my personal relationships with other people and the details of my personal life unless I want to take that one step forward. So it's just like you're treating a coworker, if you're not really, really, really good friends with them, you're not going to tell them all of that stuff. And it's the same when you're networking, you don't want to overshare. Nobody wants to hear, in a professional setting, stories that aren't appropriate for that. And so it's about reading the room, reading your audience, understanding whether you want to be friends with them or whether right now is a professional setting, but you still want to be friendly.
Yeah.
Like, try and make sure you have a good icebreaker. Don't dive in with, so my dog just died. It's going to make a really awkward opening. And what do you think, Jade?
I'm a bit taken back already. My mind has just gone blank now. Like, oh no.
I've literally had people like, I'm like, oh yeah, cool. So how are you doing? What's up with you? And they literally just start with like this really sad tale, and I'm like,
oh no, okay.
I've literally just met you.
Oh, okay.
I'm really sorry that's happened to you.
I think, it's very, please don't overshare when you just met someone, because you're still trying to scope out, what each other's boundaries are, because boundaries for everyone is very, very different. So I think to answer your previous question, I would try to make it clear in the communication that, like, sorry, are you are you wanting to use the space to vent and just release, or are you actually looking for advice or workshopping some kind of like, or troubleshooting some kind of thing that we can do to help fix whatever problem may be on your mind? And yeah, sometimes it can be like, oh, my dog just died. I don't know how to handle it. I'm like, okay, are you just venting, or are you actually trying to invite me to come and let me help you in a way? And then that kind of solves a lot of miscommunications, because sometimes people just wanted to vent. And then when you go in with like unsolicited advice, you're like, no, what? And then obviously people misinterpret that, and then you get like a weird like, I can't get a good vibe off you, therefore I'm not sure if I want to work with you. And then networking hasn't been successful in that way. So yeah, clear communications.
So just try and clear up what it is. What is the intention of you giving me this?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And what about for you, Nichola?
So I sort of see it similar to how you play The Sims.
All right.
Hear me out. So when you got that full bar on The Sims, you've got all the options available to be like, yes, my dog has passed away. But when you're acquaintances, you don't have those initial options to say like, X, Y, and Z has happened to me. You only have like the initial first encounters. Like approaching work colleagues is very much work first, play later, and I feel like friendships are vice versa. So you can be like, hey, we all know each other, and why don't we try and work together and make something magical? Whereas at work, it's like, we're making the magical thing first, and oh, I see that you also like the anime. Let's talk about that thing. So,
right, nice. Yeah, I think that's a good way of managing it. I think also from what you guys have said there, like if you are in a networking setting, then try and put yourself in like a networking frame of mind. Like think to yourself, I'm only really going to talk about the game I'm making or the ideas that I have around, especially, obviously if you're networking in game development, it doesn't really apply if you're networking in something else. But yeah, just try and think about the conversations that will be relevant to the environment.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you guys whether, for some people, they're not always aware, but like, do you know if you're introverted, extroverted, ambiverted, and how do you deal with like your energy levels for these social interactions? Jade?
Ooh, me first.
Yeah.
I actually think that I'm an ambivert now, but when I first started organizing game dev lunches and game dev London events, I was actually introverted. But because after talking to loads of people and putting myself out there, it kind of clicked in my brain that says like, okay, if you really want to stay working in this industry, and you have to network, you have to make connections, you have to meet other people. You can't just be in a locked room in the basement on your computer doing things, unless you're that type of person. But bravo you if you can make it very successful. So knowing that at the back of my mind, I made it a thing for me myself to become more comfortable in going out to people, making eye contact, smiling. Don't forget to smile. But yeah, I was an introvert at first, but now I'm an ambivert because it makes me excited to see friends and, check in on my peers and say, hey, how's your project going? And then they get excited. Then I get excited. But then also, like, after EGX, I know when I get home, I'm going to sleep for like maybe 2 or 3 days, and then I'll be back again. So I'm personally an ambivert, but I know when I need to take breaks, and I think that's really important as well. It's okay to say, sorry, I'm going to step out for a bit. I just need to take 2 minutes by myself, and that's fine. I think I encourage people to be more open with that and be okay with that.
And how about you, Johnny?
For me, I feel like I'm one of the people who doesn't really know. I think I've spoken about this recently, I think with Stu, where he was like, I think you're probably an ambivert. And my life, I feel like I flip-flop between a few. I started off very shy and introverted. And then I actually, that was when I was in school, and I actually broke out of that by growing an afro to make people talk to me so that I would train myself to get more comfortable in social interactions. And then I think I became quite extroverted, and now maybe I'm somewhere in the middle. So I think I echo kind of the statements that you made, Jade, in the sense of when I go home from this, I'm going to have a good nap, and I'm going to be quite, like, not socializing, ultimately. But I don't feel extremely drained by coming out and seeing people and doing things. And Ultimately, I think everyone has their own strategy for managing that energy level and what you're able to do. But the most important part is just to know when you're at zero and know that it's okay to just say, you know what, I'm going to go home now. And there's no shame in doing that, and nobody's going to judge you for doing that. You just got to do you.
You're definitely very good at that. You've been helping me out over like the last couple of days, being like, I think, now's probably like home time. And I'm like, he's probably right. I mean, I did ignore you completely on one evening, but...
He regretted it.
I did regret it. What about for you, Nichola?
I think it also depends on like what stage I am at the moment, because before the pandemic, I was like very extroverted, like, yeah, let's go out, let's go do things, let's go do some networking events. Whereas when the pandemic hit, I was like, I'm not going to talk to anyone. I'm just going to shut myself in my room and just make games. But I feel like I've been slowly creeping out of that more and more, and like going to events like this, saying yes to doing panels, and just like, yeah, having more office parties, and I'm staying out later and later. It's like I'm slowly becoming back to my extroverted self.
Nice. So we're going to get a little bit deeper and darker here, because although we spend a lot of time in the wonderful side of networking and making friends in the industry and hanging out with each other and high-fiving and being like, good job on your game, dude. There's also some not quite so pleasant experiences. So have you had, maybe I should say, when you have had a bad experience networking, how have you had to deal with those experiences? Start with you, Gianni.
I mean, before I tried to enter games, when I had a marketing career of like 4 or 5 years, I definitely did a lot of networking then as well, though it's very different to games networking, I would say. In terms of games networking, what leaps to mind is I had an experience recently talking to somebody who ran their own studio, were very successful, and it felt like they were talking down to me quite a lot because I was less experienced, less knowledgeable on certain aspects of our conversation, but maybe more experience in other aspects. I'm a marketer, and I've been marketing for like 6-7 years. So it's not like I know nothing, but being spoken down to can damage any kind of goodwill I might have had at the end of that conversation. Despite it not being overtly rude, I left it feeling like, damn, what was that about? You didn't need to say it like that, kind of thing. So that's what leaps to mind for me, and my method of dealing with that was primarily to not to directly address it, but to work through it in my own mind and why that might have occurred, and whether basically deciding that I didn't really do anything wrong, so I'm not to blame for that happening, and that's just the nature of people sometimes. Not everyone is an amazing person, although I think we try to be. And that's all I went for, really.
Yeah. And what about you, Jade?
I got a kind of a long story here, so maybe Nichola, you wanna go first,
Okay.
and then.
Well, if it helps, I haven't had any bad issues or bad experiences, so I'm going to pass it right back to you.
Oh, okay, that's very good. Let's try and keep that record clean then.
When you're in the industry, it's crossed.
So I actually have a story, and this took place on Friday. I was talking to a developer, and it got to the point where just like, oh, okay, let's try and maybe keep in contact with each other. It'll be really good to see where your project will go. And so I was asking for like, okay, what's your contact details? What's your business card? And TLDR, that dev said, oh, I'm on LinkedIn, or you can contact me on Tinder. And the way that I dealt with it is, obviously this will be very different. Some people might just like be really shocked. They might just do a nervous laugh or anything, but I'm quite confident in myself now because I've been in this wonderful industry, like at least the nice parts of the industry, for quite a while. So I was quite comfortable to be like, wow, dude, keep your pants on. That was really inappropriate. And so this person reacted and took a second to think about it and said, oh, I'm so sorry. And I went, and I walked away. So maybe that might not be the right way to do that, but for me, I needed to make that stand to say, hey, that really wasn't appropriate. And I'm sharing this now to say, like, hey, please don't, talk to any of your peers like that, no matter how they present themselves, no matter what gender they are, like, just please treat each other as equals, no matter the background. And yeah, secondly, it's different for everyone with what is the appropriate way to deal with that. So I just tweeted about it and it got a bit viral on Twitter, but at least I felt like, okay, lots more people know about it. And unfortunately, this kind of thing still happens. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, sorry.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I think the important thing from that is that whenever these things do happen to anyone, like I know it's hard to like not be silent about it because sometimes you can just be like, oh, well, maybe it's just me or whatever. But I think it's actually really important to make sure that you let other people know that this has happened, especially so that other people that maybe are just trying to figure out how to have interactions with people don't go and do that stuff because it's just dumb. When I spoke to you about it, I was like super shocked. I even just from a like a human being perspective, I was like, how could you not have read the room and know where you are? And I think from their perspective, well, they're not really going to potentially know, but like they could have had like a really good opportunity working with you.
Yeah,
and,
I was
and all
working
of
on
the
an
things.
opportunity,
Yeah.
potential opportunity for them, and I'm like, I've gone to that stage where I was so angry about it that I'm not going to forward that studio's name to this project that I'm working on. So unfortunate, but again, sorry for the other dev on that team who just saw this whole thing happen in slow motion, and I was like about it. So yeah, it's really important to be professional, especially in this professional setting, and keep that hat on because we're not in a pub, we're not in like someone's house party or anything. So yeah.
Yeah. So back into the light mode.
Sorry.
Quick switch. Nothing happened here. So obviously at Game Dev London we put on events and things, and I just kind of wanted to touch upon how we create safe spaces. Like we kind of like to champion the fact that we create safe spaces and that we are open and inclusive to everybody. And Jade, you've been doing this more than any of us, so how about you talk about that?
So, sorry, this might be more of a question for me now, sorry. So yeah, in terms of creating safe spaces, I find that just because I'm not like the majority of this industry. So we all know this industry is mostly straight cis white dudes. That's fine, that's okay, that's the way it is. But for me, I would start to create safe spaces for like people who are just not that. So for myself, I don't drink. I'm obviously not a dude. I would try to make whatever venue I have access to accessible for other people. So it can be a financial barrier. Like, okay, let's try to make this my event cheap or free if possible, but obviously not making Game Dev London go into the red. That's also a thing. Bathrooms are a big thing for me because I have a lot of trans and non-binary friends and every kind of friends in between. So, stuff like bathrooms are really important. So having a venue that has, if possible, gender-neutral bathrooms or accessible bathrooms even, because, I have a lot of friends with disabilities or even hidden disabilities. Why can't we make more of an effort to cater for it? It's not a big deal. I just go to the venue and say, I have a checklist here. And then obviously there's other things like being safe. Is there a code of conduct? Is there enough signposting where if an inappropriate thing happened between my attendees, do people know where to go? So then I can go up to that person and say, dude, not appropriate. Sorry, I assume it's a dude. Maybe it won't be a dude.
It probably will be.
But also not appropriate, please leave, or make an appropriate action. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do to make this industry safer for everyone. But yeah, just basically listen to your peers. Listen to your peers who don't look like you or sound like you. I think that's the TLDR I want to take away here.
Yeah. For you guys, obviously you've been with us quite a little while now, and you've been to like the events that we attend, and you've been involved obviously in organising those events and all of the other stuff that we do in between. How do you feel? Well, what are your experiences from the outside of the Game Dev London experience? Johnny, let's start with you.
Sorry, was that outside of the
Well,
game?
maybe from outside coming in, and then
Yeah.
your experience of how we do it.
Yeah, I definitely think Game Dev London takes a lot more care with exactly what you just said, basically. I've been to a number of different conferences and marketing conferences of different proportions and events and all sorts, and nobody really, particularly in those settings, which are also traditionally white cis male, often more corporate settings, nobody really thinks about any kind of accessibility at all, really any kind of code of conduct at all. Obviously, there is one, probably somewhere tucked away, written up on somebody's computer and not posted anywhere. But it does show at the Game Dev London events. You know, we have traffic light stickers system for how comfortable you are being hugged, or all sorts of different small but impactful details that can help people feel more comfortable in the space. And ultimately, you need to be comfortable to network successfully anyway. And if we want the games industry to be more diverse and inclusive and representative of more different people, then we need to make those people feel comfortable. And the Game Dev London is doing a lot to achieve that. So that would be my comparison.
And what about for you, Nichola? In fact, if you could throw in, because I'm not entirely sure how you even found us.
So that is a good question. I actually found Game Dev London because an old tutor of mine recommended me to Game Dev London, and I was like, "Oh, this is a cool podcast." And there aren't many podcasts out there that specifically talk about game developers in London, or just in and around London, and their experiences and their stories that they want to tell. There are other podcasts out there, but Game Dev London just felt homely. It's quite nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I joined through a recommendation, and the fact that there was both an online community of people that people can chat about everyday things and game development, as well as coming to events like this and going to the lunches as well. It's nice that there was both a digital and a physical meetup opportunity, because I feel that some people who don't have the courage and the confidence to come to these events, there's still a space for them. So just having the options of accessibility for everyone in a space where we can chat about games, I just felt was really cool.
That's perfect. I love that. I quite like what you said about the podcast there, because when it came to the podcast, so before, like Jade said, Jade was running Game Dev Lunch, and then me and Jade had a couple of conversations, and I said, I think we can do more, and I think we can rebrand to Game Dev London. And then one of the key things that I wanted to do was to do this regular podcast. And I wanted it to be a lot more about the stories from developers' experiences, as opposed to just here's technically how you make a thing, and here's the problems that I had making a thing. And
this is what I did.
Yeah, I really wanted to get this more emotive human side of it, especially I was listening or trying to consume as much game development stuff as possible, and every podcast I came across was the same format, which tended to be three white bro-ish dudes talking about game dev. And from my experiences from going to Game Dev Lunch with Jade, I'd already seen that it's way more diverse than these three white guys. So I'm glad that that's actually come through.
Thank you.
So we've only got a few minutes left, but I definitely want to let people know what you guys do and where they can find you. So Gianni, let's want to tell people more about what you do and where people can find you.
Yeah, so I'm, like I said, I'm a marketing manager at the moment and a game design student. So I'm most active on LinkedIn, really, Gianluca Montaque. And you can also find me in every GDL Discord that there is at this point, in one way or another. But that's me.
Jade?
The best way to keep in touch with me is on Twitter, so at JD Wasabi. Freelance composer. I've written for different kinds of games, but I'm actually working on a project in musical theater called Asian Pirate Musical. So at this moment in time, not actively working in games because it's a lot to write a musical. But yeah, please do feel free to come up to me and say hi. I hope that I've presented myself to be a very friendly person. And yeah, no, ask me more about Game Dev London or any tips and tricks of how to network, especially from a non-white dude perspective, and hopefully like try to make maybe a more safer environment to make you yourself feel a little bit more comfortable because it is hard to network in general. Thank you.
And Nichola?
Hello. So yeah, you can generally find me on Twitter at Humphreys Media. By day, I work at Shark Mob London. By night, Game Dev London hosts. I would tell you about my project, but I can't. But when oh yeah. But yeah, when I'm not tweeting about anime and tattoos, I'm also participating in game jams where I can. There are a few of my friends that I participate game jams with in the crowd right now, so shout out. But yeah, that's where you can usually find me on Twitter.
Cool. And my name is Stuart De Ville. I'm one of the co-founders of Game Dev London. I also run my own studio, and I'm a character artist for another studio called Later Entertainment. You can find me everywhere online as Stuart De Ville, at Stuart De Ville. And if you're struggling to find me, God forbid, you can actually just Google Stuart De Ville, and I'm covering the internet right now. So thank you guys. We've been Game Dev London, and hope to see you out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.